All right, welcome to our civic education class. So last time in civic education, we looked at governance, we looked at the importance of governance, characteristics of good governance, characteristics of bad governance, and we went further on to define what citizenship is, characteristics of a good citizen, and so forth. So I just urge you to keep on watching these videos, keep on revising. Actually, let's change strategy. So I want you to get a hardcover civic education book, start getting past papers and start sort of studying and trying to use these videos to enhance your understanding of civic education. So I'll be a little bit fast today because I have a forensic science test tomorrow. So bear with me. So I want you to be at your topmost level of focus, and then just try to review this video during your civic education study session. So there is one aspect of governance that we didn't talk about last time, which is just the final bit of governance, because remember, governance is defined as the way people are governed in their state, if you remember that definition. So I just want to, so today I want us to focus on this last bit of governance in relation to the House of Chiefs, and then give an introduction about human rights, the United Declaration of Human Rights, a little bit of historical background on what human rights are. And then we're going to end the lecture. And then next time we meet for civic education, we're going to focus on the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which is a very interesting document that you have to know, because it can come as a long essay or a short essay or just a few MCQ multiple choice questions that can come under the topic of human rights. So to understand the roles of traditional leaders in governance, we have to understand the type of legal system that we have here in Zambia. So the interesting thing about Zambia's legal system, so I really love these sticky notes, because remember, civic education is about knowing the terminologies before you can actually dive in the actual topic. So as you are studying, you can highlight a few things and try go on the internet, try to research, and then use sticky notes and highlighters to help you study. So we want to understand this term here, House of Chiefs. So we really have to understand what's happening in our legal system here in Zambia. So as you can see there, please write this down. Zambia has a plural legal system. So remember, the word plural means consists of more than one. Consists of more than one. So plural, two, three, etc. Just more than one. So Zambia has a plural legal system consisting of the general law based on the English customs, customary law, the traditional aspects. That's the one that we're trying to focus here. So we have the general law, which is based on the English law, and the customary law, where the House of Chiefs come in, and a variety of bodies of rules and practices generated by semi-autonomous. Semi-autonomous means they have a bit of independence, so they can come up with certain rules based on, so semi-autonomous social groups like the church. So customary law consists of customary laws of Zambia's 73 ethnic groups. So each type of individual ethnic group, each type of tradition and tribe in Zambia has some form of semi-autonomy in contributing to these customary laws that we're going to discuss just now. So remember that the legal system of Zambia is sort of a plural legal system, and it's based on two aspects. We have got the English law and the customary law. So like I said, Zambia consists of about 27 traditional leaders, but that number has sort of uh, because of the 9 provinces that we have in Zambia, and each of those 9 provinces has to elect at least 3 leaders to represent the House of Chiefs. And because all 9 provinces are contributing at least 3 representatives, that makes 9 times 3. So we have about 27 traditional leaders. However, because now the number of provinces is sort of like 10, meaning we're going to expect about a House of Representatives, which consists of approximately 30 chiefs. And because even the House of Chiefs is sort of a pseudo means a little bit not completely true. So pseudo-political system, this House of Chiefs, they elect their members every 3 years. And someone can only run for approximately 2 years, but they cannot run for a third term. So the House of Chiefs elects the chairperson and the vice chairperson from among themselves. So they're a little bit biased there because they elect um, the House of Chiefs, also the chairperson among themselves. So, but the basis of this House of Chiefs, what you should understand is that they elect 3 members from each province, and they can only run 2 terms. And their main role, their main function is to contribute to the customary laws that we have here in Zambia, which are not that much legally binding, but they are actually legally binding because, like we said, Zambia has a plural legal system. So let's look at the function of the House of Chiefs. So the first function that we have to discuss is uh, they discuss bills affecting customs and tradition. So this is what I was saying. So bills affecting customs and tradition fall under the customary law category, which can be legally binding because of the plural legal system that we have here in Zambia. And they also debate and pass decisions on matters concerning customary laws and also customs. So let's define what these customary laws are. So by definition, customary law is a law consisting of customs that are acceptable as legal requirements. So these are customs, traditional customs that are accepted as legal requirements, obligatory rules of conduct, practices, and beliefs that are so vital and intrinsic part of a social and economic system that they are treated as they were laws. So these customary laws from all the different ethnic backgrounds in Zambia can actually be legally binding. A good example of a customary law is our lobola system. So that's a customary law, like before someone is married, um, uh, the man interested has to pay some sort of dowry price. But at times, these customary laws can be sort of evil in a way because at times, if the head of the house dies, some customary laws say all that property belongs to the husband's family, and they can also set grounds for things like property grabbing in some cultures. So customary laws can either serve as a good purpose or a bad purpose because they are legally binding, even in matters of divorce, where they say, all right, that based on customary laws, etc., the woman has a right to like half property. So it depends on the tribe. Now, under the House of Chiefs is a very important element to discuss these certain customary laws, but some of them, some traditions are a little bit strange. So these customary laws can be they can be evil, like the example that I gave on property grabbing, or beneficial in matters of divorce cases. So another function of the House of Chiefs is to discuss and decide on any matters referred to it by the president. So if a president, so the president decides to implement a bill that can affect a certain constitution, those House of Chiefs can sort of come together and sort of discuss. So submit the resolution of the House to the president, who in turn submits them to the National Assembly. So if they, maybe for example, they are trying to discuss a bill on rural electrification, the president wants to introduce better roads and electricity to a certain village constituency, the House of Chiefs can come together and sort of discuss about the bill, say, is this bill against our tradition, is bringing technology to various business, to various chiefdoms going to improve our lives, or are we going to start getting rid of our tradition and embracing foreign culture? So anything that the president brings upon the House of Chiefs is subject to debate based on certain traditional customary laws practiced within those ethnic groups. No wonder that's the function of three representatives in each ethnic background, so that they should have an ideal representation of the culture that is present in Zambia, separate that from the English law, so that we should have some form of distinction and they should make a sound decision that would be presented to the National Assembly. So what are some of the problems of the House of Chiefs? So the first one is that it has a real influence on issues of governance and, it has no real influence on issues of governance and development. So because, these guys, the House of Chiefs, are mostly interested in, is our culture going to be preserved, lobola, dowry payments, property grabbing issues. So these are more cultural sense. They are not real governance issues like sovereignty of the state, food security, certain types of human rights, education, infrastructure development. They don't have that much of a real influence on the social issues of governance and development. The second problem of the House of Chiefs is that it also plays an insignificant advisory role, as all its resolutions have to be debated upon by the National Assembly. So remember, our constitution is a rigid type of constitution. So whatever advisory role that the House of Chiefs is going to make is not all that significant, because the actual people who are in charge of usually passing the law in Zambia is a huge National Assembly with a lot of constitutional representatives. So chiefs are not allowed to join any political party like members of parliament. So because we want them to make sound decisions based on the customary laws, we don't want them to be influenced by external political parties. So they are not allowed to join any political party, such as the members of parliament. For this one, you can debate whether it's true or whether it's not true. I'm going to reserve my comments on this one. So this is the final segment of governance. So go back, revise the notes on governance. What is governance? What is citizenship? What is the constitution? Keep it fresh. So we now go on to give a brief introduction of human rights. And again, with every topic in civic education, you cannot separate the aspect of a historical background. So each and every topic in civic education would want you to know the history and then compare the history to the current happenings, the history versus where we are now in the current state. So don't always expect that they'll ask you a historical background question, but you always have to find a way of linking history with the current state, because they will want you to, they can ask a real world problem and you have to link it with the current happenings. So so last time I said that human rights are those rights that are intrinsic. They are like a life, just by the virtue of you existing, you have a right to those, to those human rights, just by the fact that you are born. They are legally binding. You are born, you have those human rights, just the entitlements of existence. Yeah, that's a better definition. So human rights are entitlements of existence. And we actually also even have posthumous rights. So even when we die, we do have certain rights of who is, of how we're supposed to be buried, etc., who has the right to our body. So it goes either way, either dead or alive. So human beings, regardless of your sex, your color, your religion, your age, your nationality, and your social status. By the way, this list is not exhaustive because the human psyche has a lot of spectrums. So these sex, color, religion, age, nationality, and social status, there are other things that are included. So it's not an exhaustive list. Or social status have the same, so intrinsic, same entitlements which he or she should enjoy in the society in which an individual lives. So again, these human rights are universal, but they are highly dependent upon the state that you are born in. Your citizenship uh, is dependent on those rights. But we're going to talk about universal human rights principles that were introduced after World War II. We are going to see all those stuff very, very soon. So historical background. So let's talk about some form of historical background in terms of evolution or development of human rights. So human rights can trace its origin from things like various holy scriptures. We could have the Bible, the Hindu Vedas. I've got a friend who's a Hindu, so I somehow know a little bit about their cultural beliefs. While we have things like the golden rule, do unto others what you would have do unto you. We have other texts referencing human rights from the Hindu Vedas and also the Quran and some in Asia. But there are certain things that we have to know, certain charters that we have to know. Uh, so certain charters that we have to know in terms of a historical background. So charters are now proven written documents throughout history. So let's give a definition because you're going to encounter this terminology a lot. The United Nations Charter, the Charter of Monday of 1222. So what exactly is this terminology? What's a charter? I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. If I'm not, forgive me, but I think it's the correct pronunciation, charter. So it's a written document or grant. So something written, proven, written, a written grant by a sovereign or legislative power of a country. So sovereign or legislative, it means independent countries that are free to run their own country independently from external influences. So it's something that's written by a sovereign state by which a body such as a city, company, or the university is founded, or its rights and privileges. So a charter is just a legally written document that describes the human rights and privileges of that individual state. So it's something that is written. So we're going to start off with something known as the Charter of the Magna Carta, not so much. Okay, so it's a very old charter, but this one is mostly, British culture was British has the whole colonial sort of queen rule, and in the past they used to knight, they used to knight people, and those were called vassals. So they sort of gave a little bit of documentation of human rights, like rights as the king or queen of England, I promise to rule my country in this way and that way. So over the course of centuries, there were certain promises to their subjects to govern England and deal with its vassals. So like vassals can be like disciples or knights according to the customs of the law available at the time. So this was all, you know, old British rules, but they did have some certain human rights. But the most interesting one that I found interesting while doing the research for this civic education class is the Charter of Mundane of 1222. So this was by a Malian chief known as Saudiata Kiita. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. But the interesting part about this one, the Charter of Mundane, from the research that I did is that it's pre-colonial. So this Charter of Mundane shows the strength of Africans to come up with their own deciding rules and aspects of human rights independent, and I'm going to be slightly controversial here, you should forgive me, independent of colonial rule, independent from religious influence like Bible influence. This Charter of Mundane showed the power of Africans in using our own cultural traditions to define what a human right is. So this actually shows the power of, you know, the African mind, the African potential, independent from the colonial mindset that we are experiencing and that we've always been experiencing. So in its preamble, remember, a preamble is like a summary statement of what a particular document talks about. It's like a brief summary and a powerful introduction of the contents of the document. So the Charter of Mundane, very, very interesting document. It actually stated, its preamble states, every human life is a life. Therefore, no life no life more ancient or more respectable than another life, and no life is worthier than another life. For this reason, every life being a life, every damage inflicted on a life needs repair. Therefore, nobody may, without reason, oppose his neighbor. Nobody may do his neighbor a wrong. Nobody may torment another human life. So this is a very, very, it goes beyond race, it goes beyond sex, it goes beyond religion. It talks about human life, regardless of who you are. It just talks about human life. And it was highly opposed against slavery. And, you know, this Malian king wanted to sort of end poverty and was opposed with slavery. And you know, these were traditional elders and heads that drafted up this Charter of Mundane of 1222. Very, very interesting document. All right, so let's now focus on the United Nations Charter of 1945. So this was after the end of the Second World War, so around 1945. So the interesting part about this, the United Nations Charter, it's sort of synonymous. It's around the same time where uh, when the United Nations was founded because of the Nazi German, you know, the Holocaust, the concentration camps, how a lot of people were killed, especially Jews. So because there was a lot of inhumane acts being done, world leaders were like, oh my God, this is so bad. We really need to do something to make a document that can be legally binding to talk about the universal principles of human rights. So at the very end of the Second World War, it brought about two aspects. And again, this is sort of beyond civic education, but you have to know this. Anyway, it is civic education actually. It brought about two parts. The one aspect is the issue, so the whole horrors of World War II brought about one, declaration of human rights, and two, a philosophy of ethics. So when I say a philosophy of ethics is decision of what do we think is morally good, what do we think is morally bad? We need a philosophy of ethics. So this is the good thing that happened after the evil of the Second World War. We had human rights and a philosophy of ethics. For some of us in the medical community, you know, these Nazi Germans, they used to do a lot of bad human experiments on these Jews. So because of these bad human experiments, another bill was introduced known as the Declaration of Helsinki, which guides us researchers on how we are supposed to conduct research on human subjects. So Nazi Germany, World War II, very interesting. I wish I did history to sort of understand what happened during the World War II background, but I don't have a historical background, but I'm starting to gain interest because you can't escape history because we do have an obligation to learn from history. So 1945, don't forget this year. So that's when the charter was introduced. And thus governments decided to come together. So intergovernmental organization was formed. So governments decided to come together and establish the United Nations, a topic that we're going to do in detail, in 1945 to promote international peace and law as well as prevent conflict. I don't know whether they are doing a good job or not, but they are trying to promote peace and prevent conflict. So they wanted to avoid anyone being unjustly denied life, freedom, food, shelter, and nationality. Therefore, to prevent individuals being abused by their governments, human rights standards, so these are the United Nations formed the reference golden standard of human rights. So human rights standards were drawn which holds nations accountable for the treatment of its citizens. Thus, this charter was drawn up in 1945. So, you know, you just can't draw up a charter without the implementation of that charter. So this charter had to be implemented. And to implement this charter, the United Nations met again to form a commission. And that commission was appointed in 1948 in a very, very important topic that we're going to do in much more detail, known as the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I like this word universal because it goes beyond Earth. So whether you are a human being on Mars or you find yourself or in another galaxy far, far away from the Milky Way, as long as you are still in the universe and you are considered a human, you are entitled to these rights and privileges. So I don't know, I like it's an all-embracing term. So as long as you are a human, regardless of whether you're on Earth or not, you are still entitled to these rights. So it was called the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Don't forget the year in 1948. So it was a commission that was appointed, and the chair of this commission, here comes the pronunciations again, Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt. So this was the wife of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt of the United States of America. So the commission came up with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted on the 10th of December, 1948 by the United Nations members. So again, this is an MCQ alert. In which year was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights declared? So this could be an MCQ, and it can also enhance your essay because people who are marking your work are looking for certain keywords. So you can define what it is, why it was commissioned, and the year. So you are raising points. Make sure you give the examiner something to pick on. Make it easy for the examiner to mark your work by knowing certain important historical dates that add quality to your essay. So this was adopted on the 10th of December. No wonder I said by a highlighter. 10th of December 1948 by the United Nation members. So the the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a set of principles by which United Nation members, remember intergovernmental organization, so as long as you are a member of the United Nations, you adhere to this standard of human rights. So by which United Nations members commit themselves to provide all people of the world with human dignity. So they set the minimum standards of how individual institutions and governments should treat their people. So here is the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It states, so this again, the preamble. Remember, you are building a high quality essay, so these things are highlighted. They have to be within your essay. So the preamble states that recognition of inherently, recognition of inherent dignity and of equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is foundation of freedom, justice, and peace. So with each and every long definition, there are some key words that have to be, that should never miss. You can forget some of these parts, but do not forget certain keywords. So the first keyword here is inherent dignity. So what we mean by dignity, so the word dignity means the quality of being worthy and honorable. So for dignity to be inherent to all men and women, it means that it should be fixed to each individual. So as long as you are an individual, whether male, female, etc., you have to have a certain quality of being worthy and honorable for being human. So dignity for your state of existence, dignity for your state of existence as a human being. So that's the inherent dignity aspect of this definition. Then there is this other term here, inalienable. So inalienable means you cannot take it away. So it's impossible to take away or give up. That's what inalienable means. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are empowered by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So these are inalienable things that no one can take away from you by virtue of you being a human being. So that falls into the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So inherent dignity and the inalienable aspect. So you cannot take it away from me, and I have to be worthy, and I am worthy of these rights by virtue of me being a human being. I'll repeat that again. Inherent dignity. I am worthy of these rights by virtue of me being a human being. inalienable. You cannot take away these rights from me, regardless of where I am. So, however, so remember the United Nations is an government organization. But what blocks this aspect, what blocks this document from being legally binding is that aspect of sovereignty. So all nations all members of the United Nations, remember, they are sovereign states. So they can do what they want. They can choose to follow it or not follow it. But it sets the standard. If you want to be a member of the United Nations, you have to uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But if you don't agree to this, then you'll be like, no, I'm not going to be a member of this. So I'm going to be a sovereign state and I'm going to treat my country under martial dictatorship law. I'll be an Islamic state. Women won't be allowed to drive. You just have to follow certain religious laws and pray every day, no going to school, no development, no taking polio vaccinations and other vaccinations that are important for the health of your citizens. We can have suicide bombers in our country. We can do what we want. So that's the weakness of the United Nations, because their documents are bound by sovereignty. Countries are independent to do what they want. That limits the actions of the United Nations. You can debate whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but as long as you are a member of the United Nations, you have to follow this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I'm going to end this lecture here. So make sure you study, make sure you continue to watch these videos, and good luck in your studies and subsequent exams. I'll end the lecture. I'll see you tomorrow.